We got a big one in College Station. Texas at Texas A&M. Texas A&M wins. Their college football playoff hopes remain alive. Why? Because they go to the SEC championship game. Texas also, if they win, they go to the SEC championship game. I think after all the chaos, though, if Texas loses this game, they're still in, right? You agree with that?
Yes.
So a little bit more motivation for Texas A&M. This is a enormous rivalry, so I'm not kind of implying that Texas won't show up here. But Quinn Ewers is dealing with a bit of an ankle injury. He should be good to go, but it was bothering him a bit at the
Mhm.
end of last week's game against Kentucky. I like Texas A&M here. Played them +6. I make this like 3.5, and you're gonna have there's a lot of things that are working a lot of ancillary factors that are working in Texas A&M's favor. Number one, special teams advantage Texas A&M. Number two, the
Huge advantage.
crowd, huge
Huge.
advantage special teams. The crowd, I mean, this as far as home field is concerned, this is as big as it gets. Like going up to where I mean, there's not a lot of travel, but you're talking like 3.8, 3.9, close to 4 points of home field advantage here. I also think that and what could that lead to? Obviously, noise, communication issues, but there was a couple comments by Elko in his presser this week when he was asked about the lack of holding calls. Did you hear this?
Yeah. Yep.
So there hasn't been a holding call against a Texas A&M opponent in 28 quarters. 28 quarters. And they have a really good defensive line. They get held all the time.
Yeah.
So it was brought to the SEC's attention. Don't be surprised if there's a couple holding calls in this game that end up killing drives. That's not insignificant. So I think that the fact that that was brought up this week
It it,
could
it
end
hits
up.
it hit Sankey's desk, and Sankey had to have a little phone call. You know it.
Yep. And I mean, the SEC wouldn't be mad if Texas A&M won this game. I don't think. Um, but I also like this Texas team. I keep saying it. Are we sure they are elite elite? There are 6 teams that have a losing record in the SEC, and one team is at 500. Texas has played 5 of the 6 teams with a losing SEC record. They played Florida, who's 500 at home, with a Yale third string quarterback and lots of other starters out. And the one ranked team they played was Georgia, and they got blown out at home. So, like, their schedule has been extremely favorable. The offense is still just lacking something, just lacking juice overall. And I think Texas A&M can compete and potentially win in the trenches here. I think this line is a bit too high.
Mhm.
Give me the Aggies. Gig 'em. Do you agree?
Full agreement. Put it on the board. Whatever we got to do here on the podcast. Listen, I don't know. We've said this all year, and I've known that we're going to be on Texas A&M, and really, it's from a pure physicality standpoint, from what I see in the trenches. Um, the best case scenario for Texas A&M is to get the Texas offense into passing downs. The question is can the Aggies prevent getting gashed on the ground? Because there are teams that have had success running straight up the gut, avoiding those edges, and been able to get some traction, moving chains, and getting Texas A&M off balance and staying in standard downs. The worst place you can ever be against Texas A&M's defense is in passing downs because Nick Skirton's going to come for you, Shamar Stewart's going to come for you. And when you look at Texas, they have no advantages in line yards and stuff rate offensively at all. Heavy tendency to outside zone. There's some power in there with Contravia and Wisner, Jaden Blue, but the Texas A&M defense highest success rate defending is outside zone. They're 62% against it. Texas is going to have a really hard time running that. Edge Shamar Stewart, who I thought with Skirton was one of the best edge rushers in the nation. Well, it turns out he's one of the highest run defenders in all of PFF. So Nick Skirton really isn't too far behind. So you want to avoid the edges against Texas A&M, and that's what Texas runs. Texas doesn't really have an inside zone that goes over the guards and the centers. That's a real problem. And then you look at Texas A&M from a defensive havoc standpoint, top 10, third in creating contested catches. I don't care if it's Arch. I don't care if it's Quinn. They're going to have a problem getting a clean window to throw to with their targets. It's an aggressive secondary that jumps routes. You kind of ask yourself, how is it that they are 55th in defensive pass EPA? And I'm talking about Texas A&M secondary. How is it they're outside the top 50 in giving up explosives, but they're third in creating contested catches? Because they're aggressive. They're hyper aggressive. They remind me of TCU 2 years ago. Like they're going to jump routes. It could pay off. It could turn into a big play for Texas. I wouldn't be surprised for Texas to have a big play because of a jumped route. But at the same time, those are sporadic. It isn't consistent. Texas A&M should absolutely push around the Texas defensive front that is 46th in line yards. That Texas defensive line has been getting pushed around by opposing offensive lines. This is Texas A&M all the way. I think there's too many points. I agree with you.
Yeah, and if you look like even just where is the wow games for Texas? Like against Arkansas, bit of a struggle. Against Vandy, win by 3. Florida, they had everything go their way. It was a great spot. You have a third string quarterback.
Third string corners.
Yeah. Like, it was just an ideal situation. But, so like, yeah, they get blown out by Georgia. I'm not sure that they're in that elite tier. And for what it's worth, SEC underdogs this year in conference play, 40-17-1 against the spread. 70%. Best of any conference over the past 5 years. Absolutely insane.
I bet that's higher on games that are after 5 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, home field advantage in the SEC has been trending up too over the past couple of years. Probably random, but it's been pretty wild.